Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're venturing into some really fascinating territory. It's where queer identity meets the chilling world of horror literature.
Yeah, it's a potent mix.
Our guide for this is a great piece from Electric Literature. It's called 7 Books That Prove Horror Has Always Been Core. Strong title. So think of this as us kind of unpacking literary criticism, discussions about some genuinely unsettling books.
Okay.
And our goal really is to get a richer understanding of how queer experiences have, shaped horror, not just subtly, but moving much more towards explicit connections now.
Right, beyond just subtext.
Exactly. We want you to see how horror provides this unique space, almost, to explore identity and societal boundaries. Expect some real insights.
Okay, let's unpack that connection then.
Yeah.
The article kicks off with this powerful idea that horror's core elements, the monstrous, the unsettling, things in the shadows, have historically been a space for queer articulation.
Sometimes a difficult space, though, right?
Oh, definitely. Liberating and suppressive, as the article notes.
Yeah.
It's about bodies and desires that just don't fit neat boxes. They find this, distorted reflection in horror.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is the shift it highlights from that coded presence to now, where contemporary queer horror authors are explicitly shaping the genre, really pushing boundaries.
Right, and Ulrich Baer, who wrote the article, and he's a queer horror writer himself, he frames it really well. He talks about horror exploring that fuzzy limit where the body and the unknown meet.
Where terror and desire collapse inside objection and ecstasy. That's quite a phrase.
It really is. It's visceral, this blurring of safe and forbidden. He even suggests these books sort of dismantle form, language itself, to create something new.
Something beyond just living and dead.
Exactly. Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting, the specific books. Let's start with River Solomon's Model Home.
Model Home. What strikes you immediately is how it messes with the haunted house trope.
Totally subverts it.
Yeah. You've got a non-binary Black protagonist going back to this, picture-perfect gated community in Texas, and Solomon just layers in historical trauma, ancestral trauma, right from the get-go.
So it's not just creaky floorboards.
Not at all. It's the haunting of systemic oppression, that feeling the article nails as being nominated as monstrous.
Wow.
And that perspective just changes everything about the haunting. Survival isn't about escaping the house. It's this continuous state of being marked, haunted by prejudice.
That's powerful. The societal fear is the monster. Okay, next up is Mariana Enríquez's Our Share of Night. This one sounds ominous. A father and son pursued by an occult order in Argentina.
Yeah, Enríquez is a master of atmosphere. But the horror isn't just, supernatural scares for their own sake.
They're doing something else.
It's allegory, deeply tied to real-world anxieties. The shadow of dictatorship in Argentina, grief, how families can break. It's all woven into the terror. And there's a big theme of inheritance. Not just money or objects, but trauma, burdens, what gets passed down, and crucially, what gets violently taken away.
Right. Makes you think about inherited legacies, societal ones, too.
Definitely.
Okay, quite a shift now to Mónica Ojeda's Nefando. Described as conceptual horror, like a glitching, hyper-virulent internet conspiracy theory.
Yeah, that description alone is something, isn't it?
It is.
Nefando really taps into something very contemporary. The horror festers in how we communicate, how we connect online. You have these 6 young people in Barcelona, all linked by this disturbing video game that dredges up trauma, violence.
So the horror is in the medium.
Pretty much. The structure itself is fractured, nonlinear, like the chaotic, addictive nature of the internet, where reality and the virtual blur and trauma spreads like a digital virus.
That's genuinely unsettling, the connection being the monster. Okay, then there's Navid Sinaki's Medusa the Roses. Different vibe again, a hypnotic fever dream.
Very different. It explores longing, loss, aesthetic decay, focusing on an affair between 2 men in Tehran.
And the queering of mythology comes in here.
Big time. Taking something classic, beautiful, and twisting it to reveal something menacing underneath. There's this pervasive existential dread.
So the beauty is part of the horror.
Exactly. The prose is apparently quite lush, but it amplifies the obsession, the sense of doom. It examines the terror of being seen, truly seen, desired, and the vulnerability of being undone by that.
That's complex. Okay, shifting gears again. Justin Phillip Reed's With Bloom Upon Them, and also with Blood, a horror miscellany. This one's a mix.
Yeah, nonfiction and poetry. It uses horror cinema, specifically, to analyze alienation under racialized capitalism.
So, analyzing horror through horror.
Kind of. The article says Reed burrows inside horror, breaks it open, revels in the viscera. It's not just critique, it's dissection, showing the social and economic anxieties that often fuel these scary stories, weaving criticism, theory, poetry.
To make you question what society labels monstrous and why. Okay, now, for something sounding really out there. Zebulon House, the psychic surgeon assists. Gothic, post-apocalyptic setting. Opens with pornographic surgical intervention.
Yeah, this one sounds like it just blows genre boundaries away, pushes language itself. The article calls it a hypnagogic descent into body horror, trans erotics, and medical spectacle.
Trans erotics exploring desire and intimacy within transgender experience.
Right, within that specific context.
Mm-hmm.
The prose is described as fragmented, unconventional. It forces the reader to piece things together, kind of mirroring the surgical acts in the story.
It's a flesh and text blurring.
Exactly. A continuous surface that sounds simultaneously grotesque and maybe ecstatic, challenging basic ideas about bodies and language.
Wow. Okay, finally, Madison McCartha's The Cryptodrone sequence. A queer assemblage diary promising a glitching cybernetic seance.
I mean, where do you even start with that?
Right.
It apparently draws from just incredibly diverse sources, computer security manuals, radical black poetics.
Which often explores liberation, identity, resistance through poetry.
Exactly. And queer post-colonial theory, looking at sexuality, gender, colonial legacies, power structures.
A real mashup.
A radical linguistic experiment, it seems. Using cuts and stitches, reassembling citations into visceral poetry, disrupting language through horror, theory, speculative digital stuff, pushing how we communicate and perceive things in this, digital surveilled age.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. We've gone through these 7 pretty intense books. What are the main takeaways from this deep dive?
Well, the core argument from the electric literature piece really holds up, I think. Queer horror isn't new. It has deep roots.
But it's evolving.
Absolutely. Evolving towards much more directness, more explicitness in how queer authors tackle identity, the body, societal norms.
You're taking these familiar horror tropes.
The monster, the haunting, the dread.
And twisting them.
Yeah. Reshaping them to talk about queer experiences. Marginalization, desire, transformation, breaking down binaries.
So horror becomes this powerful lens.
Incredibly powerful, maybe even necessary, for looking at what society deems monstrous, grotesque, uncanny, especially in relation to queer lives and identities.
That's a really compelling synthesis. This has been, well, really illuminating, makes you rethink horror's potential. So a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe mull over. Where else, in what other genres might we find these kinds of unique, maybe unexpected spaces for marginalized voices? Spaces to explore identity, challenge conventions?
What other fuzzy limits exist in art, in literature, where terror and desire, the known and unknown, intersect with who we are?
Good questions. We definitely encourage you to explore queer horror more. Maybe check out some of the books we talked about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.